Hello everyone, and welcome to what I hope will be the first of many CEO interviews here on Freetrade. I'm David Kimberley, and I'm part of the editorial team here at Freetrade. Now, before we begin, I want to engage in a little bit of self-promotion. If you haven't signed up to Honey, our daily market updates, then do head over to our website. That's freetrade.io/honey and sign up for those. You can also see, hopefully, that link in the watermark. We also publish a new piece of analysis every weekday on the Invest Hub section of our website, so remember to check that out too. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Avihu Tamir. Avihu is the CEO and founder of Kanabo, a CBD and medical cannabis company based in Tel Aviv. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Kanabo held its IPO earlier this month, and it's now trading on the London Stock Exchange. So Avihu, welcome. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
So to get started, can you tell me a little bit about both your background and also the company background? So how did you get into the cannabis sector, and what is it that Kanabo actually does?
That's a question I'm getting a lot, I see. In the UK more than in Israel. Why did you get into cannabis? So first I want to say that in Israel, it's already a quite legitimate industry, very simple to cybersecurity or many others, and that's maybe one of the things that will change now in the UK as well. But my historical reason was a personal need, truly a personal need for the product. I started as a patient, 2012. Israel is the first federally legal medical program in the world. You had prescription being prescribed already in 2000, and a very defined medical program was set in 2006. So when I received my medical license, a physician that recommended cannabis for me already had 200 patients that are being treated. And my indication was for migraines. I suffered from migraines since I was a kid. And migraines is this type of indication similar to pain or to problem with sleeping, that it's not severe enough to deal with it for many years. And it's something that you just, people are seeing as quality of life. So that's why I got to an older age until I actually started to treat this. And when I got my medical license, I discovered that while the plant is amazing and has a lot of medical benefits, it seems like that the delivery methods are a bit from the Stone Age, I would say. I found myself sitting with a group of patients and having a nurse teaching us how to roll a cannabis cigarette. And that wasn't my preferred method to consume my medicine. And I wasn't a smoker. I never smoked before. And that was a bit different. I remember saying, if that's what the doctor is recommending, maybe that's what you need to do. So that really was one of the points where I had this eureka moment saying, okay, this is something can be better here. And started this long process having a first cannabis company in Israel that was a distribution company of flower-based vaporizers, understanding the limitation of the raw material itself, the flower. And then in 2016, starting to work on Kanabo, when the idea is very simple. How do we find a solution to combat smoking as the preferred method for medical cannabis? And although it seems like a very easy question, it's quite challenging because oral consumption of cannabis is a big problem. Oral consumption of cannabis, the preferred methods of physicians and the medical establishment, is far from being the preferred method of cannabis patients. So imagine this, you have on one side the medical establishment seeing this plant. Some physicians believe that it has a lot of medical benefits. but they know only one delivery method, and that's pills, tinctures, anything that is very, very precise. Definitely not smoking or inhalation. And on the other hand, you have thousands of patients and probably hundreds of millions of cannabis users that preferred inhalation of cannabis because of many, many challenges of oral consumption of cannabis. One of them is it's a bit like rolling the dice. You don't know how quickly cannabis will affect you orally. You don't know for how long, and you don't know what will be the intensity of the cannabis. Now, in many other medicines, that's okay. But when you're talking about a psychoactive medicine, that could be a challenge, having consumed too much, or having consumed too much and discover that you consume too much after 2 hours. So that's really why patients are preferring smoking. And that's where Kanabo is coming to try and have a solution that makes everyone happy. Physicians can prescribe a metered dose via inhalation, and patients can actually get a safe method to consume cannabis via inhalation.
Okay, so maybe for people who aren't completely familiar with what it is you guys do, can you maybe explain, first of all, what is the vape pen that you're selling, and why? I think you've touched on a bit why it's needed versus something like droppers or other things that we see here, which are maybe more common. And maybe on the second part, I mean, my understanding is that it's just CBD in the vape pens you're selling, or is that not the case?
Yeah. So today, the product that's being released to the market is first a wellness product that has not only CBD, but doesn't have, I would say, the psychoactive ingredient THC. So it has more cannabinoids, more active ingredients than just CBD. CBD is the main one, but it has others. And it's being sold as a over-the-counter wellness product. But in addition, the company has developed medical cannabis with THC in different levels for the medicinal market. And as you all, it was published just the other day, we have signed with Life Group distribution agreement for bringing this product to the medical market in the UK. We're planning to bring the medical market, the German medical market, launching in Israel later, and just moving ahead with really taking control of the inhalation of medical cannabis across Europe. So I can show you the product here. We're talking about a product that is very small and slim and quite easy to use. And it's mainly two pieces. One piece is the hardware, and the hardware is rechargeable. And one of the benefits of this is that although it's a medical device, and the barrier to entry for patients is very low. The price point of the hardware is around 50 to 60 pounds. It's not something that is really a barrier to entry. I would say the brain is in the cartridges. The cartridges are sterile cartridges that are being injected with the formula. Each formula will be different. You have formulas with different ratios of cannabinoids, some for pain, others will be beneficial for sleep or for mental health. Like one of the things we're researching today is post-traumatic stress. And the great thing is that all of the temperature and the coding is happening in the cartridge. So once a patient receiving a cartridge, he's dropping it into the device, and the device is already loaded. One inhalation will give you exactly 1 milligram of material. So it's a meter dose. It's a very simple device, but smart device. And one of the benefits is anyone can use it. There's no buttons. You don't play with the temperature. Everything is coded inside the cartridge itself.
Okay, great. So something you did just touch on there briefly is you're targeting people, I think, only in the UK and Germany at the moment. I mean, you just said you'll be doing Israel again in the future. But I think that's maybe a bit unusual in the cannabis sector, because I think so far it seems like the US is, first of all, just a bigger market, but also that it's been much more welcoming. So, I mean, from my point of view, it seems like the UK is still quite tentative in allowing kind of cannabis companies to set up shop and do business. I think GW Pharma was one of the only companies really active here for a long time. So I guess my question is, why did you choose the UK to do business and to list and everything, as well as Germany, and not just go for the US market?
I think that we have a built-in advantage in becoming a major player in Europe. Having coming from a scientific background company that has a research and development center in Israel, being based on preclinical trials and soon clinical trials as well, and having a medical device. All these perhaps will be appreciated in a US market, but the US market had become already a very recreational based market. If I'm not wrong, I think that this year the recreational sales are going to exceed the medical sales. And even the medical sales are very oriented recreational. There's no real process of receiving a medical license. So while going to the US or Canada, and that's perhaps a midterm strategy or long-term strategy, there's a lot of competition and less unique selling points. Being in Europe, it's not only that we have a unique selling point, there's a major barrier to entry to any US company or Canadian company. For them to pass the regulation that is needed for a medical device and for extracts and formulations that are EU GMP manufactured with the right preclinical studies is a 2 years probably barrier to entry. And that's really the core of Kanabo. We want to be leading medical CBD, medical cannabis or THC, both of them in this region. And by being first, having a barrier to entry, really opening a big gap from other, and that probably will come, North American companies to this region.
Yeah. So it's interesting. When you were going through the money raising process, looking for investors, that sort of stuff pre-IPO, what was the reception like? I mean, I'm guessing I think the people who funded you are based here in the UK, but was it, as you said at the beginning, kind of a bit unsure, a bit cautious, as though it's something new and maybe a bit risky to be involved in, or is it not the case?
So I think we were, I would say, lucky or unlucky, I don't know, enough to be in a quite long process. Because being the first, you're a bit of a trailblazer. You know, your path is not defined yet, and we started the process in March 19. We signed the head of terms with Spinnaker Opportunity, the cash shell, in March 19. And so we had a long process. And when I started, or before even signing the agreement with the shell, I had a type of mini roadshow with UK bankers, some very big ones as well. And let's say that in the end of 18, the beginning of 19, the financial environment wasn't so supportive of listing a first cannabis company. And for them, it was like I landed from outer space, not from Tel Aviv. And that was like, you're crazy, that's not the place where cannabis companies are going to excel and succeed. I can tell you that the roadshow we did in January this year, it was a totally different story. We had a very, very high over subscription. And most of the complaints were that we're not raising enough money, we should take more money, because there's a lot of interest and more investors that were complaining that they were scaled back. And that's good. That means that, first of all, there was a shift of minds from the financial industry in the UK, and that's a key. I think it's beyond that as well. I think what we're seeing now, and that's something that we don't see yet, but we're going to see very soon in the national media as well, there's a shift of mind in the regulators and decision makers as well. I think that they're starting to understand how big is this opportunity specifically for the UK. Now being post-Brexit, UK can move faster, not being tied to this big bureaucratic on a regulation side union like the European Union, and being maybe the first to lead this market. So that's what we saw. What happened in Canada. Canada basically has had their golden age suddenly, a lot because of the cannabis. So there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. And on the regulatory front, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because at the moment, it seems like the sorts of products that you guys are selling, CBD, vape pen type stuff, if I go to the corner shop now or to a kind of health food store where you can buy supplements and stuff like that, I mean, it's very easy to buy it, right? It seems almost totally unregulated and just sold as a kind of food supplement, something like that. So is that something that you see changing? And also, if it does change, do you think that would be to your benefit? Would it work against you? What would happen?
So I do believe that CBD should be accessible to everyone, and it should stay accessible to everyone. At the same time, it should be regulated from the point that not to mislead customers by putting products there that sometimes do not have any CBD or not the right percentage. And from a safety point, to have products that don't have some levels of THC in them, and safety measures as any other food ingredients. So I think that regulation that is coming now is definitely beneficial for the whole industry. For Kanabo as a medical company, a medical cannabis company, it's obvious that will be a benefit. Having the a very or a higher barrier compared to what you have today is good for a company that is already in a barrier in a standard of a medical standard. So I'm welcoming both for the industry and for the shareholders of Kanabo.
Okay, that sounds good. But what do you think? Do you have any idea what that regulation would look like? I mean, you said you wouldn't want people to be restricted from accessing those sorts of products.
Yeah.
But do you think it would end up with where it would be the kind of thing you need a prescription for, or do you think it will stay OT as an over-the-counter
with
product?
CBD in the UK? It seems like the path is going to be novel food. So that means safety, that means stability. It's just more of a robust regulation on the production and development of these products, but not limiting the who can buy them. So that's where I see this, and that's already rolling and happening. Medical cannabis, on the other hand, I believe that the process should be on the other direction. Medical cannabis should be more accessible. I believe that it should be beyond just these private clinics. Private clinics are doing a good job by making cannabis accessible, but in a country like UK, similar to Israel, it's not the US. There is a health system that is a national health system, and cannabis that is replacing many of the drugs that are being prescribed under NHS should be under the same program. So there's no reason why cannabis that perhaps replacing an opiate is something that physicians can prescribe.
Yeah, and can you talk actually about that a little bit? Because I think there's some knowledge in the public domain about how medical cannabis is regulated at the moment. I mean, my understanding is it's there's been a trickle of legalization, but it's not really passed on to customers or consumers, whatever you want to call it, yet. And even though it does seem to be legal here in the UK, there's only a very small number of people who've actually been able to access it. So, I mean, first of all, can you talk a little bit about what the regulatory environment is like now for prescription medication here, and also what changes you see happening, either positive or negative?
Yeah. So right now, the regulation is that medical cannabis is falling under a category that's called unlicensed medicine. That means that you can import the product based on a prescription. And that makes it a bit more challenging logistic-wise. There's some creative things that the clinics are doing, but in the end of the day, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it does give a path to market, but not a very an easy logistic path. So let's say a clinic or a pharmacy that has a bunch of prescriptions, then they're doing a bulk import and prescribing these medicines. In the eyes of the patient, he needs to go to a private clinic for an interview and getting a private prescription for cannabis. Where I think that it's quite the benefit of what's happening in the UK is that it's not the first time that the country is moving to a more organized medical cannabis program. We saw that in Germany, in Canada, in Israel. So there are models out there that we can look. And one of the things that is happening is that there's in most of these countries, there's a cannabis unit. Imagine like a cannabis czar that is leading this, because they understand that cannabis is it's not one medicine. It's basically a whole cabinet of medicines that based on that plant. And then setting some methods and rules to be able to prescribe it is a type of herbal medicine. I hope that cannabis will be able to be prescribed by GPs. And that's what's happening in Germany. You're going to your doctor that knows you, that have your background, can understand your medical file, and it's quite accessible. And that's where I see that the market can really evolve. And in that market, the potential is taking 2 to sometimes 4% of population that can enjoy, I would say, a relief with cannabis, and gives you a bit of aspect on the size of the medical market only in the UK.
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, we have thus far really focused on the UK. You touched a bit there on Germany, where you're obviously going to be working as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, is there any difference in what you have planned for the UK versus what you have planned for Germany?
So Germany is a more established market, the biggest market in Europe, and now even surpass Israel, although Israel program started before. And the market over there is based really on GPs prescribing. So you have much more availability to get a prescription. The market is right now, like many of the other markets, is heavily leaning to flowers. So you would see 70% of the market are cannabis flowers, when 30% are these tinctures and oils. And Kanabo will really be the first time or the first player that will have this capability to transition smokers or patients that are smoking their medicine to non-smoking method. And so we're going about, you basically see in the US, in North America, that the segment of vaporization of extract, these pods, is the fastest growing segment in one of the fastest growing industries. And that's why, because that's the only real alternative for patients that are smoking today.
Okay, and something you touched on at the beginning of the interview when you were talking about the US market is the kind of blurring of the lines over there between medical and recreational. Now, assuming that one day there is legalization for recreational use here in the UK or in Germany or wherever else you're active, is it possible for you to then branch out into that market, or do you see yourselves purely focused on the medical side of things? I know it's a big hypothetical, but I'm just interested to understand if that's something that is possible down the line.
At this point, we're focusing on the medicinal side. We're focusing on the medicinal side not only because that's what's available in the market, but because we believe that this is more of a defendable, I would say, have a barrier to entry to this market. You invest a lot of money in this regulation, in the clinical trials, in the medical device, in order to have this benefit of being behind a protection of invisible wall, I will say. Now, having said that, it's still easier for a medical company to have, let's call it a premium recreational brand, than a US recreational company to try to maybe move to a medical market. So we will have this maybe potential of doing that once the market will evolve to that point. But we will never give up on the medical pharmaceutical line of business. See it more as maybe an extension of our CBD wellness line of business. So that's definitely a possibility. I agree with you that it's probably now not a question of if it will happen, it's more a question of when it's happening, and maybe what territories in Europe will see first recreational markets. And it's exciting. It's exciting because if we would have this discussion probably 3 years ago, everyone will think it's insane to talk about the recreational market, even a discussion, a debate around that. But here, it's something that is happening already.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, it's remarkable how much has changed even in the past, I would say 5 years, definitely here in the UK, but also I know in Israel as well. So maybe to go back to Germany versus the UK, I mean, what sort of split in terms of your revenue or where you see your sales coming from would you say you see between your UK and German market? And I guess down the line, Israel as well, you mentioned you'll be opening there as well.
Yeah. And I will put another split between the medical and the CBD, because I believe that in the first year and a half, majority of sales will be from the CBD business line. And that's obviously less barrier to entry, a market that is more mature and existing. In the CBD line, UK will be a major player. Right now, the UK is the second biggest CBD market. Germany is growing quickly, but still UK is leading. On the medical cannabis side, Israel and Germany will be bigger markets in probably the first 2 years. I do believe that the medical market in the UK will grow quite fast and will surprise many, many people. In 2 years from today, numbers can be similar to the size of the Israeli market today.
And how big is that market today, just out of interest?
In sales of revenue around 150 million euros.
Okay.
So that's already a significant market, especially if you're a unique player in the market that is providing the only medical vaporizer.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just to finish off, I mean, you've just raised quite a lot of money. What do you have? What are you planning on doing with it? I mean, what are your plans for this year in terms of expansion, growth, and all those sorts of things?
First challenge is to grow quickly the wellness side of the business, both in the UK and Germany, establishing a stronger sales team in the relevant territories and markets. We're coming with the medical device very soon. Going to have the medical CE mark launching, as we announced, in the UK, and later in the year, Germany, in the medical side. Preclinical studies that already passed will move to clinical study. So for the first time, I would say, in the world, there will be a clinical study for this type of technology. That means for the first time, physicians will be able to see a bioavailability and PK graphs and compare it to smoking or oral consumption of cannabis. And that will be a big, quite interesting for many physicians and medical establishments around the world. And looking beyond that as well, looking into having our own distribution channels, moving from a company that's doing product development and commercialization today to a company that controls its own distribution channels.
Great. Well, that is about all we have time for. So thanks very much for joining us, Avihu. And thanks to everyone who's watched as well. Remember to visit the Invest Hub on freetrade.io for more information on Kanabo and to keep up with all our latest articles as well. So thanks again to our guest, Avihu, and hopefully we'll have more videos like this in the future. So thanks again.
Thank you.